Hi guys, today I'm going to be talking about building out a dedicated streaming PC, and what I'm going to show you here today is two different builds. One, a power bling build with all the bells and whistles on it, and the other, a value build for the more budget conscious person. So a lot of this is going to depend on how much money you want to spend. And before I even talk about the prices and stuff, let's try to understand a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish here with a dedicated streaming build. Basically, when you are trying to stream and play your games on the same computer, you're putting a lot of load, CPU load, from the game that you're playing and also from the streaming software that is trying to encode all the video and audio and send it to a streaming factory to distribute. And that kind of load can affect your gameplay and your stream. You'll see stuff like dropouts and slower frames per second and things of that kind of nature. So what you want to do in that case, if you really want a good looking stream and not run into those problems, is to separate the functionality of your single computer into two computers, so that one is for gaming only and the other is for streaming and encoding. Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about is the dedicated streaming computer that's going to be used for streaming and encoding. So what I have here are two different builds here that I came up with, and prices, by the way, are as of May 3rd, 2018 on Amazon. I went in and I pulled out these prices on the builds that I thought, components that I thought would be most beneficial to help you as a streamer and producing really good streams. The Power Bling build happens to be my exact setup right now, my component setup. And there's some things in here that you probably don't really need to spend money on a higher end kind of stuff. So, but I left it in here anyway, just to see you, just to show you what I'm working with. And then I thought about, hey, if people don't want to spend this kind of money, then what about trying to pare it down into getting into a more value conscious build. So first thing that I would highly recommend right now is to go out and get the current Ryzen 7 2700X CPU. It's 8 core, 16 threads, very fast, very quick, and from my early test results, I'm able to do very nice 1080p streams at medium CPU preset with Obs Studio. Okay, the motherboards difference is, if you're going to go for a higher end motherboard, typically you're going to get very good performance on the higher end. I mean, the more you spend, obviously the better you're going to get. I mean, yeah, there's going to be some little things that are going to be added to the motherboard to make it a higher price, but in general, from what I've seen, is that if you buy a really cheap low end motherboard, you're not going to get the best performance. So one of the big things here, if you can see the price difference, is between the MSI X470 Gaming Pro Carbon and the X470 Gaming Plus, is that there's about a $70 difference here. But in my case, I wanted a higher performance motherboard, so I went with the Carbon. Okay. Now when it comes to memory, try to stick, guys, with the very best that you can get, and don't try to cheap out on this end. Make sure that the memory model is fully supported by the motherboard. Okay, that's very important because sometimes RAM doesn't work very well with motherboards, particular motherboards, and you're going to end up going back and forth between where you bought it and pulling it out and spending a heck of a lot of time. You don't need to do that. My recommendation is just to get Corsair Vintage LPTX 3200 megahertz. I have 16 gigs in it, so I got two 8 gig sticks, and the AMD Ryzen supports, as in their specifications, 3200 megahertz. So definitely go for that and just use stable RAM. Now this is where when it comes to power supply, you don't need a whole heck of a lot of watt support. I mean, if you're just going to be driving one basic GPU, you can get by with maybe even 500 watts, but I choose to use 650. So with gold, it's a higher rating. You may get a little bit more energy efficiency, which saves you money in the long run. But I put up the EVGA 650 watt here, and then the Corsair 650 watt bronze, and you can see there's a slight price difference there, about maybe around 40 bucks. Okay. Now for liquid coolers, I highly recommend that you get a liquid cooler. Don't use the Wraith fan that's on it. When you're trying to overclock, you don't want to overclock this 2700X. You're going to be tossing that Wraith cooler if you're going to be going up anywhere near 4.2 to 4.3 gigahertz. So don't even bother using the Wraith. Go out and buy a all-in-one liquid cooler. And in this case, I listed out two very good ones, NZXT Kraken X62 and over here the H100 V2. I happen to own both of them, and both of them are very, very good. Okay, and the price difference is big. There's about a $50 difference. Both are, I believe, 120 millimeter fans, had dual fans on them. But mainly reason why I bought it because for the Kraken, I wanted to have it supported with my case, NZXT case. Okay, which is the next topic. Avoid getting any mini or micro ATX builds and cases and motherboards. I would not recommend it because of the heat. When you're trying to do streaming, it's a constant CPU load that you're going to be applying while you're doing encoding, and you don't want to run into problems where your whole system starts to overheat due to the space and small form factor. So I recommend getting it at least a mid tower. The NZXT S340 Elite is around 89 bucks, and although I don't have this one, I've seen it. The Corsair Carbide 270R seems to be a very good mid-tower case. There's about another $40 price difference here. I also happen to own a Corsair Carbide, Corsair Obsidian 750D full ATX tower case, and if I were to do this right and do it all over again, I would use that instead. It's about another 30 bucks over this. It is very efficient cooling, massive tower case. And a lot of fan, and it just seems to really do a better job at cooling than these small mid-tower cases. So if you got the money, go ahead and do it. Now, in terms of all the bling, all the color and the lights and all the flashing doodads, you don't need that, of course, for a dedicated streaming PC, but I decided that I wanted to put that in for my build. And I went with NZXT products just to make sure that they all stuck to the same case and cooler manufacturer. So I had to go out and buy a RGB controller, lighting control, fan controller and light controller, and it only came with two fans. So I have actually 4, so I had to go out and buy 3 more in a triple pack. So that's the reason for that. For storage, this is all a matter of whether if you can spend it, then spend it. If you don't have to. It's not necessary. But what I did was I went out and got a Samsung 960 EVO NVMe SSD drive. It's much fast. If you watch my prior video, you can see how fast it is when it boots up, that I did yesterday. If you can't afford that, then go out and get a Western Digital 1 terabyte black performance. It's a very fast SATA 3 6 gigabyte per second drive. I have a ton of these inside my office. I've used them throughout the years. I've had no problems with them. They are very fast, high quality, and that is a major price difference. You can see the $200 versus $53, so that's about $150 price difference. Okay. Then for the GPU. You don't need a high-end GPU to be put in a streaming PC. You're not going to be playing games on it. Okay, all you need is a GPU that's going to be able to render Windows 10 graphically on the screen. And for me, I went out and bought a 1030 GT MSI to do that. I probably really didn't need it, but I did so anyway. But on the value build, you can go out and get a Gigabyte GT730, I believe, 2 gigabyte, and I'm sure that should work also. Okay. For the monitor, you don't need no 144 hertz gaming monitors, any of that stuff. Just go out and get a 60 hertz. You just want to show your streaming software running. You're not going to be playing any games on it. So just go out and get a cheap, 23-inch, 24-inch monitor, and these go for about $100 these days. Okay. And now for the input devices, I went all out on this. I don't know why I did it. It just looked cool with all my Corsair RGB input devices. But obviously do not need it. You can go out and get a Logitech wireless keyboard and mouse for like $38. So you can save considerably amount over the the $220 that I spent here. Okay. And the mouse pad. You're gonna need a mouse pad, of course. 20 versus that. I like the Corsair MN300s because they're really silky smooth, as opposed to more of a fabric kind of a mouse pad that's a little bit more harsher. For networking, you may need some Cat 5 or Cat 6 patch cables. I just happen to have to get some to be able to go from my gigabit switch to my my streaming servers. And then of course you need Windows 10 Home. Can't get away from that. So if you look at the total price makeup for a dedicated streaming PC, if you're going to go all out, you'd be looking at about $2,000. Again, I'm taking some of this off because you don't need all these fancy input devices. And for a dedicated streaming value build, you'll be looking at about $1,400. So what I want to try to convey here is that streaming is not a very cheap hobby. That if you're going to be doing it right, you got to be able to put some money aside and have the expectations that you're going to be spending this kind of bucks on another computer to be able to produce good quality streams. Too many people try to go on the cheap and try to use one single PC to do their streams, and that may be fine, but at some point it may not look very good. I mean, I'm sure that if you looked at Twitch and YouTube streams, that you can see the pixelation and dropped out frames and stuff like that. Well, hopefully with what I've got here, I should be able to eliminate that entirely because I'm not having any CPU load on just one computer. Okay, so that's the reason why you do it. For those who are using Obs Studio, my recommendation is to use the NDI plugin for this. You don't need to use any capture cards or anything. You can just use NDI and go over the network. I have seen very good performance, and the latency is very minimal. It doesn't even matter. I mean, both of my computers are sitting right next to each other, and the gigabit switch is sitting in another room, and the amount of the latency is so minimal. It's noticeable, but it doesn't really matter to me, right? So anyway, we're gonna call this the end of the recording, and I hope you learned something from this and take whatever you can from it. If you have any questions, leave some questions in the comment section. If you like what you saw, hit the like button, and appreciate it if you subscribe. Thanks for watching.